Good morning, welcome back. This is Daybreak and thank you for staying with us. In a moment, we'll be taking a look at the radical education reforms plan in the report handed over to the President yesterday by the Presidential Working Party on education reforms and what this means for the country's education sector and the human capital needed for both the domestic market and also externally, to which the President credited Kenya's education system, and whether the recommendations will better the education sector in the country. The recruitment of academic and administrative heads of universities in the country will no longer be conducted by the Public Service Commission should the recommendation by the Presidential Working Party on education reforms is implemented. The Professor Raphael Manavu-led task force attributes the poor performance by many universities in the country to the lack of credibility in the appointment process, which they say is often marred with ethnic considerations and political interference as opposed to merit. The task force also recommended the merger of universities in line with the specializations to enhance performance in research and innovation. Safin Achieng Ouma has the highlights of the far-reaching recommendations, which also tasks universities across the country to urgently prepare for the competency-based curriculum transition.
The first cohort of the competency-based curriculum who joined junior school in 2023 is expected to join universities in 2029. According to the report by the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms, upon full implementation of CBC, 60% of learners will enter science, technical, engineering and mathematics courses, 25% will enroll for humanities, while 15% will be enrolled for creative studies. Universities are therefore expected to adequately prepare for this transition. The task force wants the Commission for University Education to spearhead the development of university competency-based curriculum framework. Universities are also expected to retool all academic staff in order to implement the competency-based education and to review their Bachelor of Education degree program to align with CBC by the start of the 2023-2024 academic year.
The report, Your Excellency, also includes an implementation matrix, and it has time frames, and that to us is extremely important.
According to the Commission for University Education, there are currently 78 universities in the country. However, the report by the task force records that while university education has expanded, few universities in Kenya are among the top 100 in Africa, and even then, only a small number are among the top 20. Many universities in the country produce below their potential, which weakens the country's global performance in research and scientific development. The task force attributes this poor performance by universities to challenges such as poor governance structures, limited productivity in research and innovation, and inadequate funds. On governance, the report points out concerns about the lack of credibility in the appointment process of heads of universities, which is often marred with ethnic considerations and political interference as opposed to merit. Currently, the vice-chancellors, deputy vice-chancellors, principals and deputy principals of Constituent College for Public Universities are appointed by councils in consultation with the Cabinet Secretary after a competitive recruitment process conducted by the Public Service Commission. The task force is, however, recommending that the involvement of PSC in the appointment be discontinued and instead universities to have the autonomy to execute recruitments internally through the University Council. The task force also wants deans of schools and faculties to be recruited through competitive appointment rather than elections. This, according to the task force, will require amendment of the Universities Act of 2012.
When one is carrying out, especially the recommendations on amending laws, changing laws, developing other laws, and so on, I tell you, it is extremely important to be all-inclusive. And Parliament is so critical.
To further address the need to enhance performance in research and innovation, the task force underscored the significance of establishing alliances and merging universities in line with specialization. In practical sense, this will mean that those universities which do not perform well will get merged with those that perform to improve their capacities to perform as one. A proposal that may be a hard sell, especially considering the fact that most universities will want to operate independently. President William Ruto affirmed that the new funding model for institutions of higher learning will not only address the financial crisis in universities and TVETs, but also ensure that education is accessible for all.
It is time to make education accessible all the way to the highest level, to anyone regardless of background, more fulfilling for both learners and tutors, more accommodating of their psychological needs, less examination-oriented, and more aligned with the aptitudes and aspirations of learners, and capable of imparting essential values, including national values and principles of good governance.
Safin Achieng Ouma, Citizen TV.
This is Daybreak, and the hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya, at Ayub Abdikadir, and at Safin_Achieng. We welcome your contributions here on the broadcast, and we will sample them within the course of this broadcast. With me in studio, on my immediate right, is Dr. Chris Galgalo Ali. He is an educationist and a stakeholder in the sector. Thank you for your time. All appreciated. Next to him is Professor Washington Okeo. He's the Vice Chancellor at the Management University of Africa. Thank you for your time, Professor. Thank you. We also have Honorable Nabi Nabwera, who is also the lawmaker representing Lugari constituency and a member of the National Assembly Education Committee. Thank you for your time.
Thank
Amos
you so
Kaburu
much.
is Chief Consul Opticam here in Kenya. Your time is all appreciated, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And beginning with you first, Amos. More than 300-page report, draft of recommendations, which are set to radically change the face of the education sector in the country. Before we come to the specifics about the universities in the country and higher learning institutions in the country, what's your take on what has been much awaited report from the Presidential Working Party on education reforms?
Thank you so much, and good morning to our viewers. First of all, I have been scanning through the report, 221 pages before the appendices and the references. And what captured my imagination, first of all, is the depth that the Presidential Working Party went. It really deserved the time that they got, more than 6 months to almost 9 months. Mm-hmm. That was a lot of work that went into it. I had the benefit of interfacing with the Working Party. At one time, even provided some technical support to it. Mm-hmm. And I really understand what it really took for them to have this kind of report. It has been very, very honest. When you go through the report, you find statements of evidence attributing to how the respective recommendations were arrived at. So I think that was bold of the Presidential Working Party, and we must really thank Professor Munavu and his over 40 members, together with a team of secretariat that have worked really around this issue just to have the report out. Mm-hmm. And maybe just what, without getting into the specifics, what I said this morning while driving here and kept on asking myself is how this report took a very radical shift from another report, which was just 2 years ago by Professor Fatuma Chege. And I sat and really asked myself why there is a serious shift, almost a 360, a shift from what Professor Fatuma Chege had reported or had recommended and what Professor Munavu is recommending. And it also reminded me of the fact that presidential interventions in education are a welcome move, but they are also something that should also raise a lot of concern, because the ministry has directorates, the ministry has got agencies which are charged with the responsibility of public policy. And so anytime a presidential intervention is coming in, it demonstrates that the ministry as well as the relevant agencies, there is something that is not right. And so from 1909, when we ever had the first the first intervention, state-backed intervention, what was called the Fraser Report of 1909, and even a more structured 1924, 1934 Phelps-Stokes report, all the way to the Omindo of 1964, and the rest that have carried on up to what Mnavo has given us yesterday. There is a clear demonstration that there is a problem at the Ministry of Education. And for me, what I have kept on asking myself for the whole night, because I have to be very sincere, I've not had a good sleep, is how we could basically be accepting that we've had a problem as a country, that the issues that are being addressed here, there is a relevant ministry, properly funded, with agencies, even with the directorates, but has not done what is supposed to be done. And now the most unfortunate part, when one goes through this report, is that it is again bouncing everything back to the same ministry, saying the ministry shall, the ministry shall, the ministry shall. And I had the hope now that towards the implementation matrix, that there will be more opening up of what should be done. But again, the whole implementation is again being circled back to the ministry. So we must maybe interrogate a little bit further and ask ourselves, why is it that the same ministry with the bureaucrats 2 years ago, whatever they were telling Professor Fatuma Shege, today when they met Professor Mnavo, they have crumbled. And the entire theoretical frameworks and conceptual frameworks that they had in place cannot hold water after 2 years. For me, that's what is really, really shocking, and it's something that we really need to interrogate. Where is the problem? Otherwise, Professor has been very, very bold in terms of these recommendations. It's a welcome move. It can take us another step forward in terms of ensuring that education is accessible to most of Kenyans who particularly rely on it, on what people like Mheshimiwa Nabib strongly believes in, that education is an equalizer and is the only pathway through which we can realize social upward mobility. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Nabi, is this generally, before we come to the higher learning question in universities, is this the antidote that would address our problems at the education system?
No, not really. I'm sorry, I'm taking a completely different approach to this. First of all, why would you have a 200+ report? You expect it implemented. You expected parents to read. You expected a primary school teacher to read and understand. In this country, we make simple things very difficult. An implementable report must be as simple as possible, as clear as possible, as direct as... I will give you an example. Look at the recommendation between TSA and education. They have caused total confusion. I'll give you an example. There is a recommendation, current state is TSA solely negotiates and settles for teachers' health insurance scheme. Look at the proposal. To review the teachers' health insurance scheme alongside the ministry. What are you saying? What are you saying? For sure, what is in that? Another one. TSC exclusively handled the promotion of teachers. And now I will talk here as a HR expert, because that's what I've done for 30 years. Then the recommendation is that they consult the ministry for promotion. Promotion is a very emotive issue. It's an issue of not perception, but it should be an issue of objectivity. That if standards are set, that if I move this phone from here to here, I need to get a grade higher. It's just that. I don't need to consult him. The moment I start consulting him, it becomes subjective. I mean, however, the good side about it is that 3 things have been achieved.
Okay, which are?
One, that the confusion around who manages a school, is it TSC or is it Ministry of Education, has been decided. Because if I'm managing a school, then I should be the one appointing the person in authority. Or if you send that person becomes my agent. At least I'm happy with that. The second one that makes sense to me, because I've been campaigning, it is removing categorization of schools. That has disenfranchised many Kenyans. You saw the other day, last weekend, the deputy president walked into Alliance. Alliance, boys, has everything you need in this country. And on the table, he put 50 million and promised another 50 million. A school in my village with 1,800 students does not have a lab. It does not have the luxury to get that money. But because Alliance is a national school, it is babied. Eh? So I'm happy that we are moving away from that discriminatory categorization to looking at a school from the same basis. The third thing I'm happy about this issue is the issue of capitation, very clearly defined, right? It's very clear. But as much as Amos believes that this report, especially the funding model for university education, makes education accessible, I want to tell Amos he's living in a fool's paradise. Okay, total fool's paradise.
The entire debate is about Honorable Nabwera, the university, so I was just taking your first accounts of whether this will address our educational problems. Professor Okeyo, coming to you, of course, as not only a key stakeholder, but an entity who runs an entire entity, a vice chancellor of a university. What's your account of what was much awaited, and is this the easy, immediate fix to our education problems?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. First of all, we need to, addressing your question, we need to look at what are these educational problems that this was coming in to fix. Our education sector has been streamlined along the previous 844 system of education. And now CBC is proposing to move into 22633 or something like that, which is basically meant to address the time that the students or the pupils take in school before they can actually mature to come out and start contributing to the society. So that is a change that we have already seen. But this education task force, basically reviewing the structure and the way the education is being offered, was much awaited. The output was much awaited. And indeed, we hope that it is going to solve the problems that have been plaguing the schools and the universities and the learning process. As my colleague here has said, it is surprising that they came up with an over 200-page, report. That's like a book. Actually, most books are not even 200 pages. So, and what the English language says is that the devil lies in the details. So there must be so much detail in there. I wish there could be a summarized report, which basically, and I hope there is, that summarizes the topical issues to be addressed. Then we can say, yes, it has addressed the problems that there were in the education sector to date. But leaving it at that level, 200-page report, that is very huge indeed.
Okay, we'll come to the specifications about the universities. That's why we're having this discussion this morning. And Dr. Galgalo, as an educationist, what's your account of what was presented to the president yesterday? I know there wasn't sufficient time to go through the more than 200-page report by Professor Munavu's team, but what's your account of the stories that you have aired and the report that so far you have heard?
Thank you very much, Ayub. One thing, the report is very enticing in that some recommendations are very appropriate. Some are very, to me, is very ununderstandable. Yeah. For instance, we have the policy already in place. Good. We had the first task force. It's not Fatuma Chege. The first task force was Professor Ayiro, who carried out the first task force. And from that informed position, the former minister, who was Amina, said, we are not prepared for this paradigm shift. And she said clearly the cost, the teacher training, the facilities, learning, resources, they are not adequate and they are not there, particularly in the ASAL counties. And I am happy he has mentioned about 50 million. Where I come from, you have seen one time in the media that some schools do not have even sufficient teachers. The only TSC teacher was the head teacher. And then you are implementing these competency or education reforms as well. So Ayiro recommended that the idea is good, but we are not prepared for now. So can we shelve it for 3-4 years while we are putting infrastructure, facilities, learning, teachers, resources in place? So later on, that idea, brought some issues. Then another minister came in, and then they formed what is called Fatuma Chege's task force. Fatuma Chege, of course, I'm sorry to say this was a tailor-made task force because it was the interest of those initiators who said, can you do this or do this and do this? And in a statement, I remember very well, Fatuma Chege said, choices have consequences, if I'm right.
Yes.
Choices have consequences. So these are the choices we have made, which has consequences. It's negative consequences, actually. We are under suffering, particularly in those nomadic countries where I come from. Absolutely, there's nothing that is taking place. Secondly, I was even presenting to the task force where one of their team came to Marsabit. And I said, where is the problem? Is the structure a problem or the content is a problem of the curriculum? And if the structure is a problem, can you tell us how it is a problem? Okay. Why do we move from 844 to 26, whatever it is? So if it is, can you please convince me? If the content is a problem, then how do we improve the content to adhere to the world of technology and innovation? These are the factors that people could not. And I recommended. And in many, I was in Meru when they were presenting task force. I was in Isiolo when they were presenting to the task force. I was in Marsabit when they were presenting. I was following them all through. I just wanted to get what the public would say. And honestly speaking, from those three counties, I came across, they said 844 should remain. Why? One, the structure has no problem. Two, it is cost effective. You will not gaggle or gangle with infrastructure or laboratory or whatever it is. What you need to improve is the content. If it is based on the competency, that is the fact. So, in other words, what I'm saying is, we are not, and now the third task force came in. It is okay, but one issue I have said, the Ministry of Education, where I was working with the Ministry of Education, we are very good at proposing policies, formulation, and what have you. But to implement, I'm sorry, even this implementation will become an uphill task.
Okay.
Yes. There's something. Yes. There are two
allow me to just underscore this, because the head of state yesterday said he will personally lead the implementation of the key radical reforms as recommended by the task force. And when we get back from the break, now we get the nitty-gritty details of, for example, the recommendations on universities and colleges funding, the merger of funding boards, the universities' diploma and certificates issuance, merger of universities, transfer of the teaching staff, open and county universities, the VCs, the DVCs recruitment, and the elevation of polytechnics in the country, because those are the very segmented areas that the report had highlighted as part of the reforms that are required at the higher learning institutions level. And the hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya. We welcome your contributions, questions, views, or opinions, and the panel will be here to respond to your questions. We'll be back with Amos, Honorable Nabi, Professor Okeo, and Dr. Galgalo after the break here on the broadcast station.